Yeah, today we're going to be having a bit of a panel discussion around collaboration, innovation around decarbonising the mining industry. We've got a couple of people on the call today. Carl Weatherell out of Canada, who's recently stepped down as CEO at ReThink Mining over there. And we've got Ed Lewis from Unearthed. So I think I'll probably flick it off to those guys to give a bit of a intro on their background and why they think sort of collaboration and innovation is critical in driving decarb in the mining industry. Yeah, leave it. Carl, you want to have a go?
Sure, thanks, Brett. And just for clarity, as Brett said, I stepped down 2 weeks ago as the CEO of ReThink Mining, but I'm still the president of ReThink Mining Ventures. I sit on the board of a startup, and we're in the process of creating a venture capital fund specifically for mining. My background is collaboration consortia for the past 35 years, starting in 1988. In software, microelectronics, photonics, astroparticle physics, some defense work, et cetera, and mining as well. So I've been doing this for a very long time. So for me, the opening statement is very simple. Collaboration is a must for whatever reason in any industry at any time.
Very good. Thanks, Tom. So I'm Ed Lewis, head of operations at Unearthed. I recently joined Unearthed from mining consultancy, which was bought by Parenti Group, Idoba. I've got a background in geophysics. I worked as a geologist and geophysicist in the oil and gas industry, built a few products, a few pieces of software that kind of really helped change and shape how we do exploration in the oil and gas space. And I kind of found myself in Curtin University, helping academics around computational physics, but also around helping them with technology problems and solutions. So yeah, now I'm on Unearthed, and I agree with Carl. I think we have to see collaboration and innovation drive a lot of the issues that are now coming up in the mining industry. And I also think I'm kind of positive for it as well. I think there's a lot of collaboration, innovation that is happening out there. I think it's not necessarily been easy. Maybe Carl's got more of a view of it over his extensive experience over the last 35 years, but I think we're definitely getting there, and I see a lot of great people working in this space across lots of different companies.
Yeah, there's, like you say, there's lots of collaborations sort of happening. Starting to see a lot more of it with all the different ways we're collaborating, Electric Mine Consortium and all these different consortiums that are getting together and sharing information. But I suppose, like, why is there such a much bigger push on this, or it's becoming more visible now than it has probably been in the past? And why is it sort of different to the challenges we've faced in the past? How?
Yeah, sure. So just to back up a little bit, two big things here is the industry has been collaborating for decades. Like, it's been going on for a long time in various forms, right? But there was a lull for maybe a decade or so. So, again, just a little bit of information. In Canada, there was something called the Deep Mining Research Consortia. It ended in 1999. 5 major mining companies trying to do technology development. It stopped. Then there's M&As and everything else going on. So it has been going on. And if you take a look at things like GMG, Global Mining Guidelines Group, again, that's a different type of collaboration. So the second really important point, you touched on it, Brett, is we have to recognize collaboration is a continuum. It can be something simple as let's work together in standards and guidelines and paperwork and roadmaps and this sort of thing, and that's easy. I think the big challenge now is the collaboration is around technology and technology development. So the reason for this, the reason why these collaborative things are happening, Electric Mine Consortium, and at ReThink Mining, we've been doing collaboration consortia since 2012. So with multiple mining companies around the world. So it's not that new, but the way it's being done is a little new. And the reason is very simple. There's a lot of pressures in the mining industry, whether it's ESG, decarbonization, social pressures, EBITDA, trying to make money. As a CEO of a mining company once said, mining companies are nonprofits because it's really hard. There's a lot of pressures. And there was a recent survey done, I think 2022, 87, 90% of executives in the industry said technology is going to help us solve some of these problems. So if you take a look at some of those consortia you just mentioned, Brett, the Electric Mine Consortium, we've got 9, or ReThink Mining's got 9 going on, et cetera. They're around technology development. And one of the reasons for that is pressure. Like the external pressure on the mining companies is immense. I actually wouldn't want to be in a mining company right now because the pressures, it is huge. And a lot of it revolves around technology. And a couple of key pieces of this technology, if you take a look at it, the technologies required to solve the problems don't exist. They don't exist, or they're not able, they don't exist to get in at the scale that's required. Take a look at surface mining. How many battery electric or alternative haulage solutions are there available at large scale to solve the decarbonization issues of mining, right? It doesn't exist. You've got a couple of pieces here and there, but the technology doesn't exist. Technology is required, need a rethink of the flow sheets, and there's cultural issues. So there's a lot of reasons why this needs to be done. And our opinion is that it's focused on technology to solve some of these problems. And the mining companies can't do it alone. It's too risky. And I'll let Ed and others jump in.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that, Colin. I think just picking up on a few points that you made, I think there is a lot of societal pressure on mining companies. I think we all work in mining, so we all know the kind of environment that we work in. But I think also the mineral demand that we're going to see over the next few years. We're moving from an economy based on liquids to minerals. We're going to have this kind of energy transition that's going to drive us to think very differently about some of these metals that are required, and really and to pick up another point, really fundamentally change the entire flow sheet, value chain. Like it's decarbonization is not like a module we can just plug in. It's not a silo. It's not going to be a department that is driving decarbonization change, right? It's gonna take small bits of technology, potentially small changes in process, small bits of innovation collectively that are going to come together to solve those problems across the entire value chain, right? We're all the way from exploration all the way through to the iPhone, and the Tesla. And I think that mineral demand is still not going to be driven. To pick up on another point, like around it's going to be driven by these usual cycles of boom and bust, right? And some of these things that we're looking at are long term. You're talking, these things don't exist yet, so we're now having to make investments in technologies and innovation that might only reap the rewards in 10-15 years time. But yeah, we've still got this background of boom and bust that's still going to really dominate our sector. Even for those metals, these critical minerals are still going to live in this world, this economic world of kind of high demand and low demand, and the mining companies are still going to react to that. So I think.
Sorry, Ed.
Yeah. No. Do you want to pick up on that point about boom and bust? Because I think
absolutely.
I kind of think it's an interesting concept that we think that. And we've seen it with lithium and nickel recently. These are critical minerals to like the energy transition, but yet they're out of favor, and so we see mine sites being put under care and maintenance. There's a kind of shift in focus and innovation, especially in some of the companies that we work with, away from these metals into other metals like copper. So it feels like the demand isn't necessarily, that boom and bust demand isn't necessarily going to go away.
Well, and a good point, Ed, about boom and bust and the whole supply chain thing. The question I always have is decarbonization is easy. It's easy, right? If you're really looking at change and you really want to do decarbonization, what you need to do is take a look at, for example, the whole zero. It's not zero carbon, it's zero, for example, zero waste. How do you get to net zero energy? How do you remove tailings? And if you tackle these larger platform sort of higher end goals, decarbonization becomes a lot easier because you're looking at alternative solutions, you're looking at alternative flow sheets, you're looking at alternative technologies. And what you said is very true. There's the way we phrase that, it's a toolbox of technologies. There isn't one that's going to solve it. It's a toolbox, right? Everybody's saying BEVs this, BEVs that. That's one piece. That's one piece of technology. There are many others that are going to drive the change and address the issues of the industry. So yeah, it's a much bigger problem. And the boom and bust, the other piece of the boom and bust too is by looking at the higher level sort of approach instead of just decarbonization. What you do, if you take a look at, for example, all-in sustaining cost of gold, right? Like the gold prices fluctuate like crazy, their highs, their lows, et cetera. And you know, a flow sheet is what, $1,800, $2,000 an ounce or whatever. But that's good. That's kind of in the middle of the boom and bust, right? What you need to do by doing these changes and developing these new technologies is buffer against that boom and bust. So your flow sheet is, for example, like $900 all in sustaining costs versus 2,000 or 1,800. You're getting rid of that boom and bust cycle. So looking at this longer term versus let's solve this because we have a 2030 goal.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think there's always been an argument that these kind of technologies and focusing on decarbonization, as you mentioned, you know, to how you get to net zero, anything, also can have a positive impact on bottom line, right? Because it potentially impacts, you know, how you do everything. It can be as simple as just optimization, which the industry has done for a long time. You know, and we've done that through you know, improvements in how we understand the processes, improvements, you know, there was a big push around business improvement, you know, lean, Toyota manufacturing, those kind of like pushes. But we need to have the same kind of focus, I think, on technology and how we kind of, and to Andrew's point in the chat, has just made a good point around cultural change and kind of bringing people along the journey. I think that's going to be really important. And you know, that cultural change, in my opinion, want to be kind of contrarian, really needs to start at the top of some of these mining companies, right? We'll kind of put it out there. There's probably no one listening. That, you know, that kind of investment in people, in change, in technological change, it really has to be driven by the executives at the top and filtered down. But I see a lot of great people in the space really trying to pull on the levers and kind of make that change. But I think we need a wholesale investment from the executives on that.
Well, what you said, I think, Ed, is a very important point. Is a saying we coined, or I coined several years ago. Innovation happens at the speed of trust, right? And it's innovation's about people, collaboration, consortium. It's all about people. It has zero to do with technology. Or you can have the best technology in the world, but if you have three companies that don't want to collaborate, forget it. It's not going to work. It's all about the people, the culture, the cultural shift up and down the organization. And what you said is quite true. I've heard from senior executives, yeah, our board is a problem. I've heard from boards, our senior executive is the problem, right? People down below are saying it, like it fingers are pointing everywhere. But you need that up and down, top to bottom, right? And that being said, though, there are a couple of companies that have that philosophy at the top. And they're actually driving a lot of these things. You can count them on 1.5 hands. But you're right; it's a massive cultural shift.
Yeah, it is a cultural shift. I mean, I saw something the other day on LinkedIn from the Brim over in BC. I can't remember the guy's name. Ben, is it? He was saying, you know, 50 or 60% of executives in the mining industry will retire within the next 5 years. So, you know, I think as well, to pick up on kind of monitoring the chat as well about leadership around, you know, I think things like, you know, just to say, Brett, I think things like this, you know, conversations like this and conversations that we can have around between us all, you know, can kind of change how we build and structure the next round of leadership within companies. And we're seeing it. And you're right, there are, you know, companies on the palm of one hand that can probably say that they're kind of driving this forwards. But I do see a lot of people throughout the industry wanting to pick this up and take it on as a challenge. Because I mean, what do you think of like some other barriers? I guess we talked about people, collaboration is one. Do you think there are any other barriers that can really change
So the biggest one to me,
direction?
the biggest one is culture across the industry in general. Like again, I worked in multiple industries, and this is tough. This is a really tough industry to do collaboration in. Like it is real. Like when I talk about collaboration, I'm talking about co-development of platform technologies. Other industries have been doing this for 20 or 30 years. Like it's massive.
Mm.
So there's cultural issues, but there's also on the supply in the mining companies, but on the supply side, there are challenges too. So we've run into a number of whether it's startups, OEMs, SMEs, along the scale of companies that have behaviors that are not amenable to collaborating, right? That's number one. Like on the supply side, there's some that are really, really, don't get me wrong, some that are really good.
Mm.
I'm not going to name the really good ones. And the corollary is I'm not going to name some of the bad ones either, but you probably know who they are, right? They just will not collaborate with anybody. It's all about me, myself, and I. And the term I have is that they remind me of Cisco in the 90s when it was all about me, myself, and I until John Chambers took over. So and the other one too, a lot of mining companies are looking at startups, entrepreneurs, new technologies coming out of other sectors, and there's a disconnect in terms of how those two levels of organizations work. And there's a disconnect over what the startup or entrepreneurs or small tech companies believe the industry is going to do. So that as a startup, you got to move fast, right? You got to move really, really fast. Yet the procurement mechanism in the mining company can take months and months and months and months or years, right? And the development
Yeah.
cycle is long. So there's that. There's also a misconception that startups, for example, oh, the mining companies are going to steal my IP. I can't talk to them. Most mining companies, I'm generalizing, most mining companies don't care about ownership of the IP. There's even a confusion over when people say IP, they're talking about three things. They're talking about IP, the asset, IP, the rights, and commercial rights of the technology. And they bundle all those into IP, and you've got to untangle that thing, right? And if you take a look at it, the mining companies are interested in commercial side, commercial rights of the technology. They're also interested in the IP rights, typically don't care about ownership of the intellectual property. If they do, they should not. So a barrier too is how you get the two sides to collaborate as well and get them to understand each other. It takes work. Like it's a lot of work to do that.
Yeah.
Some of the technology needed too is really expensive. Like a lot of the stuff we work on. You take a look at the platform technology. It's too bad Grant wasn't here because he was our contact in his previous life for one of the technologies we're spinning out. It's hundreds of millions of dollars to commercialize this stuff. This is big, heavy technology, and there's not enough capital out there to get this stuff commercialized. So the collaboration goes to a certain point, and then it's like, okay, now we need to raise 20, 50, $100 million to commercialize, and there's very few places to go. So there's a number of different other barriers to get it there quickly. Like the whole point is acceleration and speed, because there is no time. If you look at the targets in the mining industry, it's not going to make the decarb targets. There's just no way. That's my personal opinion. It's not going to work. But I'm not the CEO of ReThink Mining, so I can say that. That's my opinion. It's not going to work. And some companies have come out and said they can't do it, right? For a number of reasons.
Yeah.
So there are other barriers as well.
Yeah. I think the speed of the change that's needed is kind of quite stark really, or startling when you really look at it. And I think if you're a mining company and you haven't ordered an electric truck now, you're not getting one until 2050 probably.
Exactly.
So if you've not already kind of purchased that or procured it, then you're probably never going to meet your target. But I do have some sympathy for like the OEMs and the vendors, and the consult, because I was on that side for a long time. It's it became a race to the bottom, right? And a lot of the mining companies kind of effectively were set up to pit everyone off against each other. And now we live in a culture in these larger OEMs where they're running on margins of 5, 2, 5, 10%, right? And 10% is a good day. And so you're right, the amount of money that they have to reinvest in their technology is quite limited. So when they do, they obviously want to protect it as closely as possible, and they do want to create a closed ecosystem where the truck doesn't talk to the mine planning software, doesn't talk to the scheduling software, doesn't talk to the the AMS. It's all because they want to own as much of the value chain as possible. But I think when we look at what type of collaboration needs to happen, what type of innovation, for me it's going to be more on an open model. where you see a lot more collaboration, not just from a personal point of view, like a people point of view, but collaboration across a technical portfolio as well, where you've got similar interfaces, whether it be APIs or whatever, between these technologies, so that the whole infrastructure of a mine is open. The technology interfaces between and the people interfaces between these things are kind of very transparent. So I think there's when I say that I'm sympathetic to them, at the same time I guess they've kind of also created the environment that we have living in at the same time. So and I think that risk aversion really kind of has come through, but for me, open, like obviously Unearthed has kind of been focused on open innovation, really kind of helping companies like BHP and South32 really kind of open up their challenges. For me, that means if we can do that, we've all got similar challenges across the industry. And when we talk about decarbonisation is not just a mining problem, right? So if we're able to share our challenges better in forums like this, but also in kind of more executive level forums, and maybe even codify those things, set joint challenges, joint initiatives, I think that'll help this cultural shift, right? And it'll also I
was going to say it. So one of the things we did starting in 2014 is we did use design thinking approaches. Brought in one of the people who helped create IDEO, which is the basis of design thinking, and use that individual in workshops of 60 plus senior executives in the mining industry and a few invited people. And I'll get onto that in a second, why we closed a little bit, right? To basically create industry level roadmaps that they all agreed to. We want to get here. Here are the problems that we need to solve. We created 5 of those industry level, and mining companies are now using those. They're using those to create their internal ones. They're used as a format or a forum or a guide, so they can actually collaborate at the more strategic level versus an optimization sort of level, right? So at that sort of level, those grand sort of challenges, again, we've done that sort of stuff, and what we're doing now is executing on those with the mining companies. South32, BHP are part of Rio Tinto, like virtually around the world. The one thing we did differently though, and this is interesting, Ed, and I've been following Unearthed, and I've talked to a few of your folks in the past, is that we used the word open innovation for quite a while, but we found the mining companies didn't. It got a little confused. So we moved to a different form of open innovation. Here's the problem. Here's the challenge. Let's get 9 mining companies together to solve this problem. So it's more, it is open in the sense that you've got multiple mining companies collaborating, but then it's a smaller team of people focused on co-developing a solution. Right. So it's a different sort of form of open innovation, but it's very similar. Very similar.
I was like, it's kind of like a flipped challenge, right? So it's more crowdsourcing the problem and focusing on the solution rather than focusing on the problem and crowdsourcing the solution. And I think there's two different ways to look at it, and both I think have their do both. And I see the opportunities there for where you've got common challenges, right? For example, we've got a common challenge in the south of WA. You've got 5 or 6 mine sites owned by 5 or 6 different companies. They're all in protected forestry regions. The government decided that they would stop native forest logging in native forests. So now you've got a challenge where these companies want to expand their mine site, but they can't because they can't log the forest. So now we've got we've got to challenge we've got to think about in 20 or 30 years time, what's the rehabilitation technology going to be like? What's this volume of soil that needs to be produced? How are we going to do that? How are we going to revegetate this and demonstrate to the regulators that it can be done, not now, but in 20 years time? And there's an opportunity there to work on a common, like a crowdsourced problem across different mine sites with probably different challenges, but come up with a solution that can be presented back to say this is the roadmap to get to rehabilitation in 30 years time. And so it's right. Yeah, I think there's opportunities to look at these things in lots of different ways.
Oh,
really
absolutely.
have the time and the space, I think, to kind of explore those avenues.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And again, too, there's a lot of organizations. Again, we're familiar with Unearthed. We've spoken to your folks several times, and there's complementarity amongst all these organizations, right? Because what we were looking at things a little differently. So what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. We're doing something similar, but a little different, so we're not treading on each other's toes.
Yeah.
So there's complementarity. As you said before, Ed, there's different pieces that you've got to solve, different pieces in the roadmaps, and we're focusing on one very specific approach to what we're doing in terms of redefining the platform technologies and platform processes, which is a little different. But again, there's lots of opportunities for various organizations to work in this space.
Yeah, definitely. And that element of not only a change in approach, but also kind of looking outside of mining sectors, the traditional OEMs and traditional vendors, to kind of crowdsource and find those solutions, especially in the digital space. I just wanted to pick up on a point you made probably about half an hour ago now, but around the barriers to entry, and when I think about some of the challenges that we run and some of the innovators that we pull in kind of outside of the mining sector, they're really not. They really don't see mining as a potential avenue sometimes, and that there are cultural barriers. There are also kind of procurement barriers for them to get into mining. Sometimes if you mention AI and decarbonisation in your pitch deck as a startup, you're probably pretty good at getting venture capital funding, right? So you can probably access some funding to get you moving. What these companies sometimes lack is site access or access to experts that have worked in this field. There aren't many people who are potash or heap leaching experts worldwide, right? So if they've got potentially a solution that could, from an adjacent sector, agri-tech, biotech,
absolutely,
it could be anything. That if they see and because you mentioned before the world is moving, it's quite the pace of change and the pace needs to be quite fast. If they kind of try to get into the mining sector and then fail, maybe after 6 months or a year, they kind of move on, because there's so many other avenues potentially for their technology which can be as lucrative as, or maybe even more lucrative than the mining industry for their technology. And those barriers essentially then might we might miss a key technology that could potentially change the game and drive down those costs, like you're mentioning, down to a kind of sustainable or more robust level that avoids the boom and bust, right? So I think for me it's not only but it is breaking down those barriers and like showcasing the mining industry as being open to innovation, open to collaboration, but also kind of open to trying new things and moving at a faster pace to kind of get those things on site in a safe way.
Well, in what you said, just anecdotally, I was talking to a colleague of mine who's an executive and actually funds a lot of startups, and operated he was parachuted as CEO of a wireless startup, and we were talking about the mining industry, and he said, if I don't get a sale in 6 months, I'm done. Like, the speed in other industries is fast, right? It is really fast. It can take 6 months to get through the paperwork in the mining industry in some cases, right?
Yeah.
So, but
it could take 6 months to find the person that you need to talk to.
Well, and that's the whole piece too. That's a really important piece, because one of the things that is very, very important is having that, I call it somebody that translates or holds a startup's hand. So we talk to 2 to 3 startups virtually a week. I think one of them's on the call today. And basically, we do an evaluation, right? We talk to them. What do you got? How does it fit? Who are you talking to? And for the ones outside the industry, tell us a little bit about your technology and see where the potential fits could be by experts who have worked in the mining industry 20, 30 years. So you do that kind of evaluation, and then And then when you've got 20 some mining companies you can approach, you make it a lot easier. It goes much, much faster. But something you said that about the collaboration is, why do we need to do this, is speed. And how is speed? Because when you collaborate, and I'm speaking specifically on technology development, co-development, or you can use open innovation, is you get solutions better, you get them up to 10 times faster, and they're cheaper, right? Better, faster, cheaper, right? Because you're sharing the technology risk, you're sharing the financial, you're sharing all these risks. And you get a lot of really smart people in the room throwing ideas at the table. So I'll give one example. One of the consortium, we've had it going for about 3 years now. There's, I think, 5 mining companies, large OEM, and a few others. And it was about to crap out, basically, right? The technology wasn't working. The target was here pretty high. It was way below. And basically the team got together, really smart engineers from the mining companies, from the OEM and others got together and said, okay, how do we solve this? Now they're almost at the point of their original target within like 3 months, 3 or 4 months, simply because they got smart people in the room to say, my favorite saying is, we shouldn't use the go, no go. We use the go, how do we go to the next step? But you get a lot of smart people like that, instead of a singular focus of 1 or 2 engineers in a single company or in an OEM, a single OEM. You get that group think to solve a problem, right? The value of that is incredible. And just anecdotally, a couple of projects that we have, going from idea to MVP, 4 years, 50 ton per hour scale, ready to be deployed on site. 5, that's unheard of, right? Like there's proof. There's proof of this stuff. You've probably heard of Blue Vein down your way that's being built in Brisbane. James, the CEO there, he's stated, he says it's about 4 times faster than if we did it ourselves. And you've got the captive market at the table. You cannot beat that. You can't beat that. A couple of notes in the chat here, it's probably worth bringing up. One of them was related to government, right? And I was a government scientist for years, and I've worked with government. There's good, bad, and ugly. It depends what country you're in. It's funny. I've heard Canadians are envious of the Australian government because the amount of funding that goes into mining. And I heard the corollary from Australians, we're envious of what you're doing. So we should be envious of each other. But governments are okay. The challenge is when you've got this speed, and when you're doing things collaboratively like this, it's a little harder to do. The programs don't fit. Governments typically are behind, they're not ahead. There's a very famous entrepreneur up here, down here, wherever, his saying is, you got to be ahead of the wave. You got to be on the wave. Governments are typically behind the wave trying to catch up. Right. Yep. So governments can be useful, but you have to use them strategically with the programming. And what you said, Ed, about on the regulator side, bring them in really early to help change the regs, because it's a 10-year cycle to change regulations. And on the finance side, somebody asked a question about the financiers. And this is an interesting story, because I won't go into the details, but there's different attitudes. There's almost bookends in mining companies related to, for example, ESG. One bookend is it's strategic to the company. We're going to focus on it. The other bookend is don't put it in my reports, right? They don't believe it. They think it's a fad. Some people have even said, I've heard, experts in the industry that are doing roadmaps, decarb roadmaps for companies saying it's a fad. It's going to go away. So you've got those bookends. What we've seen last year, I was listening to a panel, financiers in the mining industry saying, we don't believe the industry. They're saying it's greenwashing. It's not real, because you've got this small group that doesn't believe in it, and you've got this other group that's very strategic. There's one finance organization actually became a member of ReThink Mining, and the rationale for that is very simple. Said, we want to see which mining companies are serious about technology development as it relates to their ESG targets. Who's doing the most work, that we can see what companies are actually doing that. They want to see the tech, and this is a really cool thing, technology development connected to financial investment of assets. It's a really cool, and we're seeing some of that now. I was talking to somebody yesterday about a VC or a private equity group in another country, and they've got a couple of funds. One is in technology, one is in assets. Bring the two together There's it's not really a startup anymore that is bringing the technology with them, but they're also bringing the asset capital for juniors. So people are actually connecting the technology development to the asset investment. So hopefully that answers a little bit. This is the sort of thing we're seeing that answers a little bit some of the questions we've seen in there about that. And something else too. I forget who put this up there. Was it Andrew? I think Andrew, you got to slow down. We can't keep up, dude. But something about reframing the problem. This is a really important thing. We talked about boards and everything else. And you know, diversity is a huge thing, but it's not typically diversity of thought, right? How many mining companies do you know have a board of directors that has somebody from the software industry, for example, right? There's nobody. That diversity of thought, I like to say, come in looking at it sideways, reframing the problem. I like that term, reframing the problem, asking different questions. And it's funny, I claimed I'm not from the mining industry. I'm doing collaborative projects in other industries. So I'd come in and people are saying, why are you doing this? You know nothing about mining. That's precisely why. Because you come in and you ask different questions, and design thinking reframes the whole problem and the challenge and gets people to rethink and move things forward to a different solution that the day before was uncomfortable. I'll give you an example. This is really cool. It's a really cool, again, so Brett's sitting there looking maybe a little worried we're going overboard or we're too excited about this stuff. So we're looking at an ore sorting. It was an ore sorting consortium. There was precious base metals and oil sands companies all together. The oil sands guys came out right at the start of the conversation, said, we have nothing in common. Why are we here? You're wasting 2 hours of our time. This is retarded, right? I'm paraphrasing, of course. 2 hours later, an executive from a gold mining company basically said, I had no idea we had so much in common. I learned stuff today in 2 hours from that oil sands company we can deploy in our site tomorrow. So by structuring things and addressing the psychology and all this sort of stuff of how people want to collaborate, you can actually get them to look at the problem differently and challenge their thinking, reframe the problem.
Yeah, rethinking it. I think I think we'll probably round out. I started with a bit of an optimistic note. We've probably kind of gone through, talked a lot about the challenges, but yeah, for me, I'm really excited about the future for mining. I think it's going to be a very critical industry, and I see a lot of really positive movements in the right direction, and I see a lot of opportunities. So I'm kind of very excited about the future.
And another thing, absolutely, something really interesting has happened that makes it more exciting is the downstream customers, like the Googles, the Apples, the car company, Mercedes, GM, et cetera. They're now looking at mining. 5 years ago, it's like, yeah, remember the Apple sustainability report in 2016? We don't need mining. They're like, now how do we help them? It's been flipped. So you've got the downstream actually pulling a little bit. So it's very positive, very good.
Yeah, really good.
So Brett, are we at time, or are we going to go over? We're losing people left, right, and center. We've blown up their brains here.
No, you've been going freestyle. I think you've answered all the questions I had to throw out there.
Yeah.
So that's good. Like, if you've still got time to keep going, then I'm happy. But I don't know. I suppose let's throw it out. Anyone still on the line that got any questions to ask? That I think you've
anybody but Andrew. Andrew's asked 12 already. Stop.
Yeah.
I think you've covered a lot of it, but who knows, you might have missed something.
Well, I'm sure we did. I'm sure. And Andrew, if you're listening, I'm kidding. I'm not serious. You've got great questions. Well thought out.
Yeah, look, I think just to pick up on finally then, I guess on some of Carl's points is that, there's lots of opportunities across, all the value chain to kind of really have like impact in this decarbonisation space. I think to kind of go back to the challenge of this, this call is around zero carbon mining. So, what does that mean for every part of the value chain? And if you're working in part of that sector or that silo, what can you do to kind of improve, or what kind of technologies do you think are necessary to to kind of meet that goal. And I think, you know, really look at the problems not only, you know, as a large existential problem for the entire industry, but really look at your individual area, you know, around, it might be in within the flow sheet, could be in exploration, could be in in the supply chain, could be in port operations, could be in you know, the downstream development of some new novel products. That it's really going to take an effort from everyone to make small incremental changes, and hopefully the combined effort will make us move faster.
Well, you said something really important, and I totally forgot about this. You said small incremental changes. When I started at ReThink Mining, formerly known as CMIC, 11 years ago, I heard something I'd never heard of. Step change innovation. I didn't get it. Like, what are you talking about? Right? It made no sense to me. And what I unearthed, no pun intended, and when I unearthed, was that people saw that we want to do that target. We're just going to hit the target. But what you just said is really important. Keep your eye on the prize and make the small steps toward it. You don't have to sit there and do the $100 million tomorrow. Do it small and stepwise, and you build the confidence, you get the collaboration going. You can still reach the target. That's what roadmaps are for. How do we get there? What needs to be true to have zero tailings? If you want to have zero tailings, what do? You don't bring waste. If you're underground, don't bring waste on surface. How do you do that? What do you need to do? Here are the things we need to do, right? Can you do ore sorting underground? Can you do processing underground? We got to remove people from the face. We need mechanical cutting, electric fracturing, whatever. All these technologies exist. It's making them so they're commercially viable and convincing the mining companies that you can actually make it work and stitch them together. But looking at the end goal and backing it up and seeing what needs to be true and execute on it.
Yep.
As I say, it's not about zero carbon, it's about zero waste.
There you go.
But that, no, I laugh, I chuckle at that, but it's serious though, because again, if you take a look at the tailings challenge, right? We worked very closely with ICMM on the roadmap a couple of years ago. If you tackle that, like if you reduce tailings if you reduce the amount of material that's going to surface, for example, say 50%, what's that do to your energy consumption, right? It's going to drop by 35 to about 35% because you're processing half the material. What's going to happen to your water input? It's probably 30% change. What's your tailings footprint? Probably 50% less. By looking at one specific piece and figuring out how do we solve that? And how do we solve it economically at the same time? But you have to ask those questions and look at it differently.
And I do like some of the reframing around, we look at all-in sustaining cost, you know, per ounce of gold, but wouldn't it be interesting to know how much waste is created per ounce of gold, or how much water is used per ounce of gold, and how much carbon is used per ounce of gold? And then, you know, those metrics then, rather than just driving down cost, if we could also see, well, okay, how are we driving down the use of water in the industry and the generation of waste and things like that.
Exactly. And Andrew, again, you're brilliant. Systems thinking. You got to look at the system. You're not looking at the point source solution. You got to look at the whole thing. What's the impact upstream and downstream? It's really, really important to do that. But it's interesting. You said that about water, and I remember some work we were doing with a mining company a couple of years ago, and they measured water in the met plant. And I don't know how they did it, but he said this plug of water was recirculated like 20 times or whatever. It was some crazy number in the met plant. Not on purpose. Not on purpose. It was an energy sump by just this water was going on. It was just nuts. Again, it was a little crazy. We're not thinking about it at the right level.
Yeah. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, I think we're pretty tapped out. People are leaving.
Yeah.
Yep, I think it's probably a good spot to leave it. Well, there's still a couple left on the call, but no, thanks for the great chat. I think you covered a lot of ground there. A lot of it
great job.
Went over my head and whizzed past, but no, it's great to hear from you too. So much appreciated.
It's good. Thanks for the opportunity, Brett, and thanks Carl for staying up late.
I know we do. We have project meetings with our colleagues in Australia virtually 4 nights a week, so I'm skipping one.
All right, great.
You're more fun than project work.
Well, that's
But it's
the
really
best
cool
thing
to
that
see the
someone said to me today.
synchronization, right? The synchronization
Mm.
between the two of us and the two organizations is fabulous.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
good.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks again for everyone, and just let everyone know that we've got another catch up in a couple of weeks on June the 7th. We're talking BEVs. I think one of your earlier things, it's not just BEVs, but having a bit of a chat about that. But yeah, that's probably what everyone often gets excited about, because it's just one piece of the puzzle. So yeah, no, thanks everyone, and hopefully catch you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Brett, and thanks Ed and Andrew and Jay who stuck around.
Yeah. Thanks, Carl. See ya.
Thank you.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye.